I know that 80% of my audience, 80% of the people watching this are not going to, that they're not going to be receptive to the ad, but it's not meant for them. Instead of thinking of that broad-scale way, broad-shot way of advertising, you say, actually, well, instead of advertising on NBC, can I advertise on Lifetime and get, because I know Lifetime is actually much more connected to the audience for Lifetime is largely female. Or if I want to hit males, young male, do I advertise on Spike? If I want to hit kids, do I advertise on Nickelodeon? So that there are now, the media, in fact, has responded to this need for market segmentation by providing audiences, by providing access to audiences that, in fact, are that specific. So these are the four, in terms of how the agencies think, how advertising thinks about the audience, right? First starts off with, well, they're kind of rational. They want to know, you have to give them reasons why you should buy this. You give them lots of information about the product. To secondly, well, actually, people actually also operate irrationally as well, and you can appeal to emotions, you can appeal to feelings, you can appeal to the third stage. Actually, people are, they also operate according to the unconscious. And so if you can reach down to that reptilian part, that's what, when Rapay talks about reptilian, he's talking about, it's a fancy name. When you're charging someone $100,000 to listen to you speak for a weekend, you have to come up with fancy words that describe what is actually quite ordinary. Okay, but that's the unconscious. Can we tap into those unconscious things that are going on in people's minds? And then this last stage, which is actually instead of targeting everyone, what we should do is we should really focus in on who we know our consumers are, and if they're different, then we need to reach them in different ways in the most effective way. That is, you can't through market segmentation. So those are four stages, and again, I want you to think about them, and you'll see why I want you to think about them cumulatively, but think about them historically and as well as develops over time. Now, and we should be, actually, this is the question. If what we're looking at is relevant, we should be able to see those changes. We should be able to see those different conceptions of the audience, those different understandings of how people operate. We should be able to see them in ads. We should be able to pinpoint, we should be able to look at patterns of advertising and say, look, there is something new happening here. This is when something new starts to happen in the marketplace as a response to how advertisers are thinking about the audience. And again, next time we'll hopefully attempt to do that. Now, at the same time as that is going on, okay, on the one hand, advertisers are thinking differently about audiences. But if you look at that relationship that advertisers stand between media and business, well, the needs of business change, and so advertising has to respond to that, i.e. branding becomes much more important, so advertising responds to that. In fact, in the 1980s, what businesses need in the 1980s is global campaigns. So businesses actually now start to think of themselves not just, I want to operate now not just in the United States, I want to operate a similar kind of campaign everywhere in the world. Well, if that's what business wants, then actually advertising changes to reflect that. And then, in fact, the structure of advertising changes to reflect what businesses need. So advertisers are always responding to the two sides of that relationship. And if you want to understand, advertising doesn't work on its own. Right? Advertising can't be understood on its own. It can only be understood as part of a relationship, as part of a complex set of relationships. And if you want to understand what advertising is doing, then by definition, you've got to understand the broader set of relationships. You've got to understand what's going on with business. You've got to understand what's going on with clients. You've got to understand what's going on with the audience. You've got to understand what's going on with media. And then you're going to figure out, okay, how does all this relate to, how do the media then, how do the advertising agencies take this in and then create something? Because they can't just take it in and kind of, they're not like Rapay. They actually have to produce an ad at some point. They actually have to do something out of this that actually has to operate in the marketplace, and that has to be effective in whatever way effectiveness is defined. And that's always a little bit unclear. So there are also, let's look on the other side. There are also changes in media. It's not just the media is set. What happens on that side of the equation also is important. For example, there is the relationship that advertising mediates is not just one media. It starts off, of course, with newspapers. Okay, the first media is newspapers, and so what's emphasized, these are print, what's emphasized is the rational quality of text, of writing, etc. So in one sense, advertising is limited by the delivery system that it has. When even if you had some advertisers, you thought in really creative ways about illustrations and about trying to get to the unconscious in the 1890s, they didn't have there wasn't a media that was capable of delivering that kind of message. So you're limited also by the message. The second thing that develops is magazines. Okay, now there are new technologies of illustration. There is photography, there is color. It forces the agencies to explore new communication forms. Again, that's added. Now the magazines can offer, you can offer full-page color ads. Well, now the potential for how you can think about communication also expands at that same time. The third medium that is introduced is radio. Now, actually, radio, when it first develops, again, it's one of those interesting little things. Radio, when it first develops, is not based on advertising. The very first radio stations, in fact, there's no advertising on the first radio stations, and in fact, in Europe, it remains that way. In Europe, radio is connected to a government monopoly, and a lot of the radio stations remain public. Whereas in the United States, what happens is they quickly get taken in. They quickly become funded by advertising. And so they become essentially delivery systems for advertising. And the agencies then, adapt to this new medium. In fact, one of the most important things the agencies do, the functions they take on, the advertising agencies actually not only make the ads, but they also, in fact, make the programs on radio in those early years. They're actually producers. So in fact, when an advertising agency would buy an hour block, and they would make the programming within that, as well as make the ads that would appear within it. And so as a result, I mean, the agencies, they hired talent, they wrote scripts, they produced shows, and as a result, they learn about radio. They learn about radio, not just about selling, but they learn about the medium in that sense. Let's go to quote number 7. This is Lisa Tall talking about radio and how it changes. They say, people could not listen to selling messages all day. So the agencies began to explore styles of communication, the communication preferences of the audience, and the production values that would hold them and draw them. Music, humor, stars, pathos, tragedy, excitement, and human relationships became familiar terrain for the advertising agency and opened up new ideas about how to improve advertising. Like all those things, music, humor, stars, pathos, tragedy, excitement. Okay, that is what's in the programming. That's what's in the program. That's the programs that they're making so that people will listen. And the agencies learn through that. The agencies learn about communication because of what they're doing. And they take what they learn about the medium of radio and they then apply it to advertising as well. So the advertising agency is not passive. Like it connects, it makes connections between business and media, but it does so in an active way. It is not passive. They learn. In this instance, they learn from being producers of radio programs. For example, in the period between the wars, we start to see the rise of what is called testimonial advertising, where people come and they testify, they stand for the product. They say, you should buy this product because I use this product. And that is only possible if there are people who are famous, if there are people who have reputation, so that they can translate that reputation onto the product. Well, that's not possible until there's a star system that develops with radio. It's not possible until, in fact, the movies develop, and there's a star system with the movies as well. So again, it's dependent upon the other things that are the other things going on. But the movies, although the movies don't make their way directly into the advertising system, but influences from the movies find their way into advertising. And so, because again, between the wars, when radio is developing, in fact, movies are the major medium of popular culture in the society. And that is what people are watching. But influences from the movies also start to make their way into advertising. So there's much more focus on narrative. There's much more focus on telling a story. Because again, before, when you only have print, it's difficult to tell a story in one page. You can do it. But when you have 30 seconds or 60 seconds to fill out, and you now know that people are used to watching stories. They're used to watching, 20-minute stories, 30-minute stories in the movies. Well, then you can start to think about using narrative as well. Narrative as well as a way to sell your product. Then comes television.
Okay, that's the fourth one. Television is added directly to the mix. Television is best at simulating interpersonal communication. There's a focus on people, on interpersonal interactions. Testimonials become even more important in this phase. The mini drama becomes important, where there's a little story that's played out in 30 seconds. You can also now, because television makes possible visual demonstration, you can actually visually demonstrate what the product can do. You can have little vignettes about the product fitting into certain kinds of social scenes. This is Lisa et al. Summing it up. They say about this, they say products have been woven into a broad range of simulated and fictional settings since the turn of this century. But television simply could do everything so much better. Magazines displayed goods amid Doric columns or Greek statues, thus positioning them within an associational matrix of images and styles. Radio opened up dialogue and social interaction as context within which appeals were made. Television swept all earlier forms into its orbit and added others, ultimately offering the whole range of cultural reference systems to advertisers as aids in selling their wares. Okay, all those things, let's come back to this. Okay, that's the relationship, right? You're going to get fed up with me talking about this, right? That's the key relationship. So you can look at how, on the one hand, in a general way, but then you add to that, you can start to make it more complicated. You can start to, not just more complicated, you can start to make it more concrete. You can start to make it more relevant as to what's going on. For example, from the viewpoint of advertising agents, how they think about the audience, you got that. Okay, they think about the audience, rationality, irrationality, motivational research, market segmentation. They're changing the way they're thinking about the audience. At the same time, the media is also changing. You've got newspapers, you've got magazines, you've got radio, you've got television. So think about this as a dynamic relationship. Okay, it's not just built and stays the same. This actually is a dynamic relationship that is added to. And if we want to understand what is going on, if we want to understand why the advertising we see looks like it does, okay, you've got to pull back the curtain. Like it's the Wizard of Oz. You've got to pull back the curtain to see the wizard behind, to see what's going on behind the curtain in terms of the levers that are being pulled. Well, this is not so much levers. I'm not talking here about manipulation. I'm talking about pulling back the curtain sociologically, pulling back the curtain culturally, pulling back the curtain economically, so that we can see what it is that propels this system of advertising. As I said, if we want to understand what's going on in advertising in the contemporary period, well, what's changed? Well, the internet has changed. The internet is added to this now. Okay, what role then does the internet play within, and especially as the internet now is drawing more and more advertising? How then does that change how advertisers are starting to think about the audience? And also, how do advertisers think about young audiences? Do they have a different way of thinking about people who've grown up on television for this entire time, who have grown up within a system of pop culture, who may be cynical about pop culture, who may be resistant, they don't want to be exposed to advertising? If you add that as well, that gives you, and we'll talk about that later on in the semester. That's the contemporary context in which changes in media, changes in audiences will. Now the question I want to pose actually is, the question is, can you then see this? Can you look at advertising? Can you look at those ads? Can you look at what is the products of this industry and see those patterns as we've examined them in the last two classes? That's what we'll look at next time.